Hi, my name is Ralph Harmon, and I'm doing my presentation on wildland-urban interface fires in California. The continuous population growth in California has caused more and more people to move away from the city and into more wildland areas. New wildland-urban communities continue to form and grow in size. As more and bigger wildland-urban communities form, there are also unavoidable new hazards and risks. One major hazard is the risk of wildland fire in the wildland-urban interface. According to the U.S. Forest Service, each year there is an average of more than 73,000 wildland fires, which burn more than 7 million acres of land. CAL FIRES found that in California there is an average of 2,500 wildland fires, which burn about 27,000 acres a year over the past 5 years. The number of wildland fires and the intensity of them seem to be increasing over the last few years as average temperatures have been rising. The rising number of wildland fires and the increase in wildland urban communities has caused the average number of homes lost in California wildland fires to double to over 1,000 homes lost per year since 1999. California wildland fires cost hundreds of millions of dollars to suppress annually, and with more wildland urban interface communities, these costs continue to grow. Something must be done to help wildland firefighters bring down the number of homes lost and the annual cost to suppress these fires. Now let's talk about the characteristics of California wildland fires a little bit. California wildland urban interface fires are noted to spread fast over large areas. They are fueled by chaparral biomes, oak, pine, and shrub bush. Long droughts make the fire areas very dry, which add to the hazard. The Santa Ana winds can range to speeds up to 75 miles per hour during the fire season. These winds spread the fire very quickly and kindle other spot fires, which make it hard to contain the fires. Now let's talk about the financial cost of wildland fires. Each year, around $1 billion is allocated to firefighting wildland fires. More than half of this budget is spent fighting wildland fires in the state of California. In the last 15 years, California has spent nearly $5 billion fighting wildland fires. This number is extremely high when you consider that California fires account for less than a quarter of the total acres burned in wildland fires. A study done by the U.S. Forest Service in 2007 found that on a per acre basis, California wildland fires are more expensive than any other state or region. There are many reasons why California wildland fire costs are so astronomical. One reason is that firefighting resources cost more. The price for equipment and firefighters are typically more expensive in California. But the real cost of wildland fires comes from protecting homes, buildings, critical structures such as power lines, and ecological problems. The true cost of fires is roughly 2 to 30 times more expensive than the cost to suppress the blaze. This leads to underfunding of the wildland fire budget. It would be beneficial to taxpayers if the true cost of wildland fires were considered. When considering the true cost of wildland fires, there are 4 categories that must be considered. The 4 categories are direct cost, rehabilitation cost, and indirect cost, and additional cost. Let's talk about direct cost a little. Direct cost is the cost it takes to actually suppress the fire. That includes airplanes that do drops, helicopters, firefighting crews, and trucks. That's the direct cost. Now the rehabilitation cost is the cost that it takes to restore power to these communities, to rebuild ecological problems that were caused by the fire, such as like watershed damages and stuff like that. These ecological restoration projects could take years, so they're often not calculating the true cost of wildland fires and leave states ending up dipping into other budgets to cover this. Then you have the indirect cost. The indirect costs are for things such as home loss and property value decrease after a wildland fire goes through. These decreases in property value after a wildland destroys the beautiful nature around it end up costing homeowners hundreds of thousands of dollars and puts them in debt. Then you have the additional cost. The additional costs are the costs that it takes to make settlements and payouts to firefighters' families of lost loved ones and to pay for lifelong ailments that come from fighting the wildland fires. When you take all four of these category costs and add them up, that's when you get the true cost of wildland fires. This true cost is way more than what the normal suppression cost that you hear on the news is. This is what leads to the underfunding of wildland fire budgets and has them having to dip into emergency funds. Now let's talk about the wildland-urban interface firefighting concerns. The high-rise and wildland-urban interface communities development has forced more structural fire departments to respond to wildland fires. Many of the suppression strategies are quite the same, but wildland tactics are very different. There are many do's and don'ts that must be considered in a wildland fire scenario. In order to safely respond to a wildland fire, both firefighters and the incident commander need to know the 10 standard fire orders, the 18 watch-out situations, and the lookouts, communication, escape routes, and safety zones, the LCESs, as they're called. When it comes to wildland-urban interfaces, there are also the 12 wildland-urban interface watch-out situations that must be considered. All this information is sometimes referred to as the safety toolbox. Once all of the items in the safety toolbox have been considered, then the incident commander can safely decide on an attack method to be implemented. I'm not going to cover all the strategies in this, but let's move on to wildland urban structure response methods. When it comes to wildland urban structure response tactics, there are 4 basic approaches that will be described. There are check and go, prep and go, prep and defend, and fire front following. Let's talk about check and go. The check and go tactic should be used when the fire is too close, if there is no temporary refuge area, TRA, or the fire is moving too fast to safely defend the structure. Check and go involves checking structures for occupants, informing them to evacuate. Once a structure is cleared, firefighters quickly move to the next structure. This is repeated until all the structures in the threatened area have been cleared. Once the fire front has passed or fire conditions have changed, a response team should reevaluate the area for follow-up actions. Then we have the prep and go. The prep and go tactic should be implemented in scenarios similar to check and go. The only difference is that responding personnel have a little bit more time to apply protective agents, such as flame retardant foams. Responding personnel still check the structure for any occupants and advise them to evacuate. Any occupants that refuse to evacuate should be taken note of so they can be checked on after the threat has passed. Before moving on to the next structure, firefighters will apply a protective layer of foam or gel. The flame suppression agent should be adequately sprayed all over the roof and sides of the structure. If there is time, the nearby vegetation should also be treated. Responders must keep a constant eye on evacuation routes to ensure they do not get trapped. Now the prep and defend. The prep and defend tactic is used when firefighters have sufficient time, good escape routes, temporary refuge areas, and a safety zone available. Firefighters must have enough time to prep the structure for defense. The steps involved to prep a structure for defense are as follows. Adequate roof access. Acquire roof access by placing a ladder on the corner of the structure that is most protected from the flame front. Clear the area, making sure above ground fuel tanks are shut off. Move combustible materials such as furniture inside the structure. Close all openings to the structure. Build fire lines around the structure, power poles, and any fuel tanks. Remove nearby vegetation. Once the structure and property has been prepped, responders can now attempt to defend the structure. Now the fire front following method. The fire front following tactic is used when either the check and go or the prep and go tactic has been implemented. The fire front follow tactic involves following behind the fire front to evaluate the aftermath. Responders should be checking for victims, extinguishing spot fires, control hotspots, and reduce ember production. That is the gist of wildland urban structure response and what wildland urban firefighter should learn in their safety toolbox. Now for a quick conclusion. With the growing wildland and urban community growth in California, it is very important for everyone to do his or her part. The only way to bring down the extremely high financial cost of the annual wildland fires is if both responders and urban interface communities do their part. Past wildland fires have shown just how destructive and deadly these fires can be if proper precautions are not taken. With more wildland and urban communities, it is necessary for structural firefighting departments to learn and implement the safety toolbox. Property owners must consider the threat of wildland fires when planning the site layout and the types of materials they plan to use. It is important that people living in these wildland urban areas follow the safety precautions. They must remember that the cost to make their property compliant is well spent if it helps save the lives of loved ones.